And today our lecture, our talk is about sickness and health, which is something that I believe that at some point we have all wondered about, we have all suffered from perhaps some type of sickness, some type of disorder, because the idea here is to make the word sickness, we can think of synonyms as well, such as afflictions, disorders, if we're thinking about mental disorders. So anything related to that. So the notion, therefore, is what is the Spiritist view on sickness and the process of becoming sick? What are the mechanisms behind that? What's the reason for some of the disorders, especially the harsh ones? And what is the way to health? What can we do to our health? It was very well known that Jesus was a great healer. He is considered, the greatest healer of all, the greatest psychologist of all, the greatest everything of all, to be honest. But he was a great healer. So whenever we're talking about sickness, whenever we're talking about health, I think it's pivotal that we talk about how Jesus worked and how he did his healings and how that actually happened. And there is this author called Humberto de Campos who Chico Xavier psychographed some of his works, and he wrote about this chapter called Blessed Gold. Gold, the word gold is the instrument, Emmanuel also loves to use this word, is an instrument, it's a pointy instrument that is used to make the cattle go forward in agriculture. So if the cattle, if the ox or whatever is working the field is there, it suddenly stops. What the goad does is prickles or pokes the cattle, so it makes the cattle go forward, so the cattle can continue to do the work. Blessed, but look at how interesting this is. Blessed goad. So he's talking about an instrument that's prickly, that's uncomfortable, but it's at the same time blessed. It is at the same time important. It's at the same time something that we must use and we must for sure need. And Emmanuel always talks about the goad of sickness sort of propelling us forward whenever we decide to slow down our march of progress. So Humberto de Campos is going to tell us about the story where Jesus was conducting his routine healing of the sick people, and some of the disciples decided to do some sort of like a tent and receive the sick there so Jesus could heal them. So we have, Simon Peter, we have Philip. They would receive the sick people, but what Jesus would do is Jesus would first preach. So they would all get there with all their types of afflictions, all different types of diseases, disorders of any sort. Jesus would first preach the gospel. He would first preach the words of the Father. He would first preach about the kingdom. He would first preach about all these things that are very important for the people that were sick right there. After that, for those who, let's say, deserved, he then would perform the miracles and he would heal the people. The people then would go and they would leave very happy, very relieved of their afflictions. And then one day, Simon Peter and Philip, they decided to come to Jesus and say, it's very hard to be focused and think of the kingdom of our Father and all of that when the body is aching. It's very hard to focus when we have the diseases afflicting us. And Philip said the same thing. Philip said, it's not easy when physical suffering bothers us. It's impossible to meditate on the problems of the soul. Look at what he said. It's impossible to meditate on the problems of the soul if the flesh remains afflicted with ailments. And then Simon Peter even says, why don't we cure all the illnesses out there? Why don't we cure all the sick that are out there so we can establish the kingdom with, more safety, with people that are happy and relieved of their pain and of their afflictions? And then there was a commotion there. The other disciples were agreeing with Simon Peter, like, yeah, why don't we just cure them? and one after the other, and they would be much happier. And we would have people to help us construct the kingdom. So Jesus decided, according to Humberto de Campos, Jesus then decided okay, so tomorrow they're going to come and I'm going to heal them. I'm not going to preach then, because they were saying it's very hard to focus when the body is, in so much pain. It's hard to focus on somebody preaching, and it is true. Their concerns were true concerns. We can understand why they had those concerns. Jesus is like, okay, so tomorrow when the sick come, they're gonna get healed, those who can, and then we'll preach after. Okay, then you guys can invite them to talk afterwards. All right, so what happened was people started to come on the following day, and Jesus healed them. And as soon as they were healed, they would leave the tent, the big tent, and then Simon Peter would see their eyes, how they were so relieved, how they were so much happier now that they got rid of their afflictions. And he would want, okay, now let me tell you about the kingdom of God. Let me tell you about what we're trying to establish here on earth. But you see, I have my sons are waiting for me at home. I can't. My work is demanding me. It's very busy today. And they would start to leave one after the other. One after the other. They all left. They didn't stay to hear a word from the disciples or from Christ. And then Jesus told Peter, study the experience and keep the lesson. Let us alleviate the pain, but let us not forget that suffering is man's own creation, helping him for the highest life. He's saying suffering is man's own creation and helps the man, the woman helps the human for the highest life, meaning the one that truly matters, the life of the Spirit. Suffering, Jesus was already alluding here to how suffering and afflictions, they can serve an educational, a corrective purpose, all based on divine justice. And he's saying the sick flesh is medicine for the poisoned spirit. Without the blessed sting, remember the word goad? Without the blessed sting of bodily infirmity, it is almost impossible to guide the human herd from the quagmire of earth to the heights of paradise. Very poetic. To the quagmire of earth, with capital E, of the planet that we inhabit, a planet of trials and expiations, to the heights of paradise, to the elevated spiritual worlds. And the idea here is the same notion that Jesus was saying, because when we're trying to cure the wounds, when we're trying to heal without purpose, or when we're trying to get rid of sickness, disorder, affliction, whatever we may call, without a purpose, without understanding what's there, the purpose that is there to help us with, there is just emptiness. And then we become, as soon as we're healed, we often fall back into the same problems that we had before. We often fall back into the same habits that led us in the first place to acquire some sort of illness, disability, sickness, whatever we may call. So it is very important for us to understand that the blessed goad here is referring to the sickness of the flesh, which is medicine for the poisoned spirit. It is medicine, and medicine oftentimes it's not something that is sweet and nice to take. More often than not, it's not, right? So for us to start to understand that this lesson of Jesus was so important, and the disciples then in the end, it was interesting because Humberto de Campos says that there was only Jesus and the 12 apostles. Everybody that got healed left. They didn't stay. And I would assume that they never questioned Jesus again as far as, let's heal first and talk later. No, let's talk first and then see if we can heal later. In the book, Jesus in Our Days, this one is psychographed by Divaldo, by the spirit Joanna de Angelis. She's going to say that illness is nothing more than a symptom of the disarrangement of the spirit, the illness's actual bearer. It's nothing more than a symptom. And I bolded the word symptom there because what is a symptom is a reflex of something else. That's what a symptom is. It's a reflex of something else. And if we think about the illness being this reflex of the disarrangement of the spirit, so oftentimes we already have the genesis of illnesses here, or may we say even the cause, because if it's a symptom of something, then it's the disarrangement, it's coming from the disarrangement, the imbalance of the spirit. And she says the illness is actual bearer. So in a way, it's like the illness, the sickness, the illness, the disorder is something that we carry for a reason. That reason could be both because we are going through an expiation. We may have misused an instrument, aka the body, that we were given, let's say the voice, the body, whatever it may be, money, whatever it may be. So we're gonna have to expiate that at some point. And there's this notion that sickness, also, if it's something we carry, if it's an expiation, it is also something temporary. It's something that will pass. Same way with the trials that the Spirit welcomes, at least in the spiritual plane, and then we come here, we shy away from the trials because they're too hard. Oftentimes, no, I can't, I don't want to. But these are things we must do in order to evolve. So the trials and expiations are both reflections in a way of the illnesses or the sickness. The sickness can be an expiation for something, let's say, for example, that I did in a previous life, but it can also be a trial. It could also be something that I need to learn some sort of virtue, let's say humility or patience. And I'm gonna come with an affliction, with a sickness of sort that will have me simply learn that virtue in a way almost by force, let's say by force. So it is something that's very interesting for us to realize that Joanna de Angelis is saying here that the illness or the sickness of the body, of the flesh, is a symptom, therefore. And Joanna de Angelis is an author that is very big on the idea of health, healing, understanding sickness. She has the whole series on her psychological series, but also these things cannot go apart. She also is talking, even though it's a psychological series, she also talks a lot about the illnesses and the sickness and the disarrangement of the body, because it's all interconnected. And in this book here called Plenitude, she's going to say the suffering is a path of spiritual redemption in light of the individual's incomplete moral development. It is a personal choice, a journey devoid of any punitive action, educating or re-educating through the very same mechanisms by which there was compromise, deviation from the path, and disrespect for the laws of life. There's a lot to unpack here. So first, suffering is a path of spiritual redemption. So the suffering that comes from a disorder, from a sickness, from an illness, is a path of is in the path of spiritual redemption because of our incomplete development, she's saying. Of course. It could not be any other way, because if we think that we are in a planet of trials and expiations, and we are still very, very far from the plenitude of the Spirit that we're going to reach, of course we're going to make mistakes. Didn't we read that in the message at the beginning? Tolerance with other people. Enrique was reading here by Joanna de Angelis, the same author. And she says in that message, nobody is free from making mistakes. Nobody is impervious. I forgot the word she used, but nobody is walking this earth without erring. Everybody makes mistakes, but we have to, due to the mechanism of divine justice, we have to correct that mistake. And Joanna is very good on her, and I love always her explanation of expiation, because it's a very common term in Spiritism that we hear a lot, expiation. She says expiation is the return to balance. Because if we're marching and we're ascending the steps of our spiritual evolution, reincarnation after reincarnation after reincarnation, anytime we deviate from the path of good, the path, if I do something very negative to someone else or to myself, I deviated from the balance, therefore I'm going to have to expiate, which is what? To return to that balance. To me, it's one of the beautiful things that she has said that explains the expiation. She's also saying that it's a personal choice, a journey devoid of any punitive action, which helps us get rid of that idea that we have carried for who knows how long, centuries, millennia maybe, that there was a very punitive God, that there was a bearded old man sitting on a throne pointing the finger at us and saying, you're going to hell and you're going to suffer forever. It's devoid of any punitive action, educating. So we heard the word that it's a blessed goad that propels us forward. We also hearing here that she's saying that it's educating or re-educating through the very same mechanisms by which there was compromise. Again, the idea of divine justice. If I misuse an instrument and I need to expiate because I misused that instrument, it's going to be on the same value in a way. It's going to be the other side of the coin now. So there's a lot of understanding divine justice, understanding the mechanisms, understanding that it's a personal choice because we all have the free will. We all have free will. And then it's how we use that free will that's going to matter regarding sickness and health. If we're going to find a path to health or if we're going to still err and stay in the path of sickness. And then Joanna de Angelis herself and other authors too, they talk about, and I wanted to bring this image. You guys know I like images, to visualize. This idea that there are two pillars, there are two things that are very important in a way for somebody to be healed, in a way for an affliction to, let's say, go away. But go away because it can go away, because sometimes it can't. She says first, and she gives the example of everybody that Jesus healed. She says first is the want. So to want to be healed, to want to be rid of the affliction, but to really want, bordering on the word of faith that we talk about, having that faith and that want, that deep entrenched desire to be healed is a decision. She's saying it's a decision because with that decision, we abandon the parasitic complacency or the fear of taking new responsibilities. Because when we have that true want, we invest. She says the individual invests, and because the individual is investing, the individual is going to get the result that they want. How interesting is that? So she's not only saying that the want is something that is very subjective. Oh, I really want to be healed from this. I really want to, deep down. But what am I doing with that? What am I doing with that? Which is very tied to the other pillar, the believing. So she says the two pillars, to want and to work for that. So she's saying that when we truly want, we invest ourselves, our time, our efforts in that thing that we want. Let's say if it's the health or being healed, it's in that specific challenge. So we invest our time and then we get the result, but we also must believe. Because if we just want and we don't believe in what we're wanting, we're not going to be able to find the result. And we're talking obviously about the evolvement of the spirit, the evolution of the spirit. We're not talking about just, I want to get healed from a minor cold that I had or something. And the same idea why we take medication. When we take medication, I gave the example of the cold, which is something minor. Except for men. For men, it's very hard. But when we take medication for the cold, or when we take medication for something that is afflicting us, let's say a headache, let's go even slower, even lower. A small headache, we can take medication for that. First, because we want to get rid of the headache. Two, because we believe that the medication works. It's something that we take for granted, the believing. But the believing is this act of faith. Joanna says it's a very serious decision because the belief, and now she's expanding it even more, she says it lives innately in man. It lives inside of us, waiting for the stimuli, for something to come and allow it to flourish. So she's saying that we already have that. We already have that faith. We already have that belief that is necessary and required for healing to occur. But if we just have the belief and we don't have the want, we're not going to make any effort to be healed, to get rid of our afflictions, which is why it's two pillars, which is why I wanted to bring this image of these two pillars. They're same size and everything. They're both important for the process of healing. And again, she talks about everybody that Jesus has healed. If we think about, to me, is probably one of the greatest ones, or as far as an example for what we're talking about here, the woman that touched Jesus' hem, the piece of cloth of Jesus, the woman that was suffering from bleeding for 12 years. And then she touched a piece of Jesus' hem and she was healed. And remember the famous sentence, somebody touched me, he tells the disciples, and they're like, Master, everybody's touching you. It's like, no, somebody really touched me. And she touched a piece of his clothing. She got healed because she wanted and because she believed so much that even without having contact with his actual flesh, she got healed. The want and the belief. And also Jesus, whenever he came to talk to people that he was going to heal, he always preached beforehand. And then there was this question that keeps echoing in gospel after gospel after gospel. Do you believe I can heal you? Like, do you believe? He would ask that to so many of those that he healed. Do you believe? Do you truly believe? So he was assessing that. The want, in a way, they already had, because they came all the way, oftentimes, walked for days to see him. So the want was there, the effort was there, but the belief. Do you believe I can heal you? It was a question that he often asked. And then we have the case of, the paraplegic, paralytic, paralyzed, whoever. There's many different versions of this. But this one I wanted to bring from this book, the Psychograph by Divaldo, by Amelia Rodriguez, called Prelude to the Divine Kingdom. It's one of my favorite books by Amelia Rodriguez, who is one of my favorite authors too, I may say. She's very poetic. The way she writes is extremely beautiful, and she retells a lot of the stories from the time of Jesus. In this one, she's going to talk about how there was this man that was it's called paralytic, and he has been paralytic for 38 years. He was 38 years. He had that affliction, that disease, that sickness. So he came and he mobilized a lot of different people to help him because he wanted to see Jesus. This happened at Bethesda, Jerusalem, where they had these, like the tide would come with the waters, and the waters, they believed that the waters healed people. So if you had a sickness, if you had an affliction, you go there, and when the waters would rise, when the tide would rise, the people who bathe in those waters would be healed. Remember the want and belief? A lot of people got healed. Want and belief from the waters. But Jesus was there in that day, and he was healing people. And then they heard that he was there. This man mobilized a lot of his friends. They helped put him in a stretcher, a makeshift stretcher. They lowered him so he could see Jesus and talk to Jesus. And then he came and he asked Jesus to heal him of his condition. And then Jesus said to him, Nathanael ben Elias. Ben was the version of the language of the time where it's meant son of. So Nathanael, son of Elias. So very specific. Do you believe I can heal you? Do you believe I can heal you? Yes, Master, I believe. And then he looked again, he's like, how do you know me? How do you know me? How do you know my name? Can you imagine meeting Jesus for the first time? And he turns to you and he says your name and who you're son of. I think that's a very touching moment in this passage that may go unnoticed. But he says, yes, I believe, but how do you know me? Do you know me? He says, I have known you since forever. I am the good shepherd that knows all the sheep the Father had entrusted him with. Jesus knew what people needed. Jesus knew what went inside each person's life, what that spirit is, because he is the good shepherd that the Father had entrusted a lot of sheep with. So Jesus knew those people, which then comes the question that Amelia also talks about, and Kari Bar Schutel, and a lot of other people that have brought so many beautiful messages to us throughout the years. They say, why haven't all those people been healed? Because a lot of those people were not healed. Why some? Didn't Jesus have the power to heal everybody? Why didn't he? Jesus knew everybody. Deep down, the true spirit. And he would obey, obviously, the will of the Father. He would obey the law of cause and effect. If somebody was going through an expiation that they needed to go through, if somebody had accepted a trial that they still needed to endure a little longer, he would not cut that opportunity from them. He would simply not, because it's a spirit of the highest order that understands and sees things the way that we can't even imagine. So there is this notion that when he healed that person, when he healed Nathaniel, because he did heal Nathaniel, Nathaniel was already able to receive that healing. For 38 years, there was an expiation. He was already able to be healed. And then remember what I said in the beginning, when I said that sometimes we get healed, or we may get rid of our afflictions, but we may fall back into the same habits that led us to be sick in the first place. This in a more narrow perspective within the same lifetime, but also in different lifetimes. Amelia Rodriguez is going to tell us in the same chapter that this man who got healed then went and was not in very good company, doing not very good things, very elevated things, after he got healed, after he received the gift of healing. Meaning he went back to similar habits that had led him to that path in the first place. So in a way, not a very happy ending. But of course, this was almost 2,000 years ago. So obviously, it's a spirit that has already found the path. In the book, The Consoler, there's a book by questions and answers, similar to the Spirit's book. Emmanuel is going to tell us that this is question number 5. In light of the efforts of medicine, how should we consider health? And he's going to say, from a human perspective, enjoying good health means having a well-functioning physical body. From a spiritual point of view, however, to enjoy good health is to have a perfectly harmonious soul, for the attainment of which it is necessary at times that we rely on the valuable contribution of temporary illnesses and deficiencies. And I bolded the word contributions there, because that's what oftentimes these sicknesses and these afflictions, these deficiencies that they are. They are contributions. They are contributing for us to be able to be on the right path, to be able to either achieve something we haven't achieved yet in terms of a virtue, or to expiate something that we must expiate according to the laws that govern the universe, the laws with capital L. So he's saying here, enjoying good health is a well-functioning body, yes, but from a spiritual point of view, that it's much more than just that. And how often do we see, or do we not see, bodies who are very, very healthy, very well taken care of, very attractive, but you question if the spirit reflects the same care. And not to be judgmental, it's a realistic fact. I worked for a while in the inpatient unit of a hospital as a psychologist, as a clinical psychologist. One of the things that I always reflected upon was I would look at so many people there that physically were perfect. Physically, great health, great this, like in a way it was incredible how they had, like how they were so well put together physically, but mentally and obviously spiritually, very much not there. So like it always made me question, like, what is, how much effort are we putting to be taking care of something that's very temporary sometimes? And Emmanuel is also going to tell us answering the question, do all physical illnesses have a spiritual cause? It's a great question, right? So everything that I'm going through, is that a spiritual cause? The wounds of the soul manifest through the human envelope. The sick body reflects the inner panorama of the afflicted spirit. When the spirit, and we have to go beyond, a little beyond here to understand, there's the sickness or the deficiency can be a manifestation of a sick spirit, but it always goes back to this idea of our thoughts, our emotions, our spirit, and the body is a reflection of that. When the body is not an instrument for us to attain something, is a reflect of something we're doing wrong, or something we have not taken care of, or something that we still must go through. So why, and this one is interesting, question 101, they asked, why will spiritual entities not be allowed to reveal the healing processes for leprosy, for cancer, etc.? Well, interestingly enough, when I read leprosy, I'm like, leprosy? Of course, the book was written 1946 or 1941, something like that. And they're saying, why can't the spirits just come, the higher spirits just come and give us everything, give us the cure for cancer, give us the cure for all of those things? Wouldn't it be so much easier? Which in a way made me think immediately of the story that I mentioned with the blessed goats, or the blessed goat, with Simon Peter, the Philip, and everybody else saying, let's just heal everybody. And then we talk to them about the kingdom of God. The thing is, there is no way that somebody can break the law of progress. Science evolves in the same way that everything else, gradually. Moral progress is something that's gradual. We can't hasten that. And can we imagine, they even say in the same answer, can we imagine if the higher spirits brought all the cures for everything? We would be taking away an instrument that is necessary in a world of trials and expiations, in a world where matter still exerts a big influence over spirit. Because that's something we learn when we're talking about the evolution of planets, how there's the spiritual aspect and there's the material aspect. The less evolved the planet and the people who inhabit the planet are, the more the material aspect has a stronger influence over the spiritual one. Gradually, it's the opposite that happens. So if we removed all sicknesses, if they brought cure for everything, there would be almost like a shortage, a lack of instruments necessary to expiate and for trials to be welcomed. What about our thoughts then? We're talking about the body, we're talking about the spirit. What about thoughts? Joanna, in the book Plenitude, is going to say that what is cultivated in thought overflows into the objective sphere, becoming an existential element in human behavior. The thought is the generating source and guiding dynamo of life toward life. Energy is present in everything, awaiting the thought to command and direct it. When it comes to suffering in its many forms, mental action is highly relevant. We are sentient creatures. We think nonstop. Our thoughts manipulate the cosmic fluid. That's a fact. And that's something that Spiritism, thankfully, has helped uncover the processes of that so well to us. So if our thoughts, they manipulate the cosmic fluid, our thoughts, therefore, they can create, they can manipulate, they can destroy, they can modulate. Can they do that to our bodies as well? Yes. Absolutely, yes. Joanna D'Angelo is talking about how mental action is highly relevant. It is even more relevant than we often sometimes realize, because it also goes through healing. Healing goes through thought. The individual must focus on a healthy vision, projecting themselves into the future in a state of balance, seeing themselves recovered, taking on responsibilities, and engaging in the activities they intend to pursue. Engaging in the activities they intend to pursue. She's talking about you doing sort of like imagining yourself better, imagining yourself without that affliction. What would you do? Imagining yourself doing that. And it's not the whole like stuff we have nowadays that's just very, the mindfulness, which is also very, very good. But it goes even beyond that. It goes through the fact that we must focus on that because our thoughts, they create that. They can change ourselves. Jesus didn't heal people by touching, and because of the cell of it was his ability to manipulate matter in the person allowing Jesus to do that. The want and the belief. The mental, she's going to say, this mental projection restructures the mechanisms of the affected perispirit. So we have spirit, perispirit, and body. Restoring its field, which results in effects such as health, harmony, and enthusiasm. So she's talking about how there is a very important notion that we must not forget about how our thoughts can help us achieve healing, can help us live better. The patient's mental attunement, she's going to say, with causality, and there's a capital C there that she wrote, wasn't me, becomes essential for the recovery of health. She wrote with a capital C because she's talking about God. So the mental attunement, when we get in tune with the higher spirits, so we know the thought can create, modulate, destroy. Thought can help us shape our reality, and it elevates us so we can be attuned with causality with a capital C. So we can be attuned with the higher spirits, the workers of Jesus, our older brother. The cultivation of positive ideas promotes alignment with higher vibrational frequencies, creating the necessary attunement with the supreme power. And I put there aka prayer. A prayer, when it's done from the heart, when it's done with the thought in the right place, not just a mechanical one, where we have perhaps done so many times in this life or in previous lives. Do 50 of this, 50 of that, and you go quick as you can, as mechanical as you can. No. A prayer, when we truly stop to think, to elevate our thoughts, to emanate that's energy, that's pulsating energy, that for sure manipulates our reality in a good way, help us become attuned with the higher spirits that are always there to help us. If it's something that we learn with spiritism, is that there's always spirits ready to help us at any time. But we must be able to elevate our frequencies, our vibrational frequencies for that. And Emmanuel is going to tell us in this other book, he's going to say how many illnesses pompously named by medical science are nothing more than vibrational states of a mind in imbalance. Right? How many illnesses are the result of a state of mental imbalance? If not all, certainly all of them have a contribution from that. From the mental field of the person, from the mental attunement of the person. Because in the same way that when we have sickness, when we have a deficiency, when we have a disability, it's so hard to remain very serene, very calm, very, kind, and it's very hard, but that's the challenge. In the same way that when we have that, the other way is also true. When we are in a state of mental imbalance, we're going to be more susceptible to be sick in the first place. Stress. What is stress? What is stress nowadays? And we see all the impact that stress has on cortisol, the hormonal level, and then our immunity system goes down, we become sick. But stress is here. We're not in a state anymore where 2,000 years ago, the stress was mostly from the body of working the field every single day. A lot of the population nowadays is urban, is not rural anymore. So the stress is here from work, from worries, from disappointments. When I say it's here pointing to my head, it's because it's from the thoughts. The remedies, well, mutual closeness and support. And when we pray for one another, our minds unite within the circle of spiritual intercession. So they're talking here, Emmanuel here is talking about work and prayer as two big remedies to cure afflictions, to cure sicknesses, diseases, deficiencies. Mutual closeness and support, aka charity. Doing something for someone else. And prayer, which is also charity when you're praying for someone else. Look how beautiful that is. How much time does it cost? How much money does it cost to elevate the thought and a prayer to someone else? That's something that helps us and helps others as well. But there's also the care for the body. So again, I said Joanna does not dismiss the body. She talks about how physical rest, well-balanced nutrition, sleep, hygiene, all those things are important because our bodies are our instruments. The same way we take our cars to the mechanic, or we take our cars to do a little work when they need, we have to, because there are instruments sometimes of transportation, sometimes of work. Our bodies are our instrument. They are something that does not belong to us, first and foremost. It's something that's going to return to the earth. It's going to be gone in a couple of decades. But it's an instrument that our spirit utilizes to progress. So we have to take care of the body. We cannot be obsessed and spend all our energy and forget about the spiritual and the mental aspect, but we do have to take care of the body. And she talks about the rest, nutrition, sleep. So hard nowadays. And hygiene, all those things. Healthy living, therefore, consists of focused efforts to maintain the body's machinery and of its systems under the balanced command of the spirit. Understanding that the body is there for the spirit, not the other way around. Not because I'm going to have a good body, my spirit is going to be excellent and my mental aspect is going to be amazing because I took very good care of my body. But the other way around. And that's a very important distinction. And Emmanuel is going to have... Go ahead. And Emmanuel, he's going to tell us in this other book called the Book of Hope, he's going to give a few prescriptions. He's going to say the gospel has a collection of prescriptions for the soul by the divine doctor, Jesus. What is the prescription that we find in the gospel? Or I would add plural, in the gospels, in the books. He's going to say, suffering from selfishness, do to others what you would have them do to you. Remember we were talking about Enrique in the beginning. Matthew 7:12. Anger, stand firm and you will win in life. This is in Luke, and this is the New International Version, because the other versions, the New King James Version, for instance, talked about patience. Instead of stand firm, say, work your patience or something like that. Vanity. Unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. This is in Matthew. This is all what Emmanuel is saying. This is the issue. This is the deficiency of the spirit. Here's the remedy. Here's the prescription. False virtue. If you aspire to be the greatest, be the servant of all. Hatred. Love your enemies. Ignorance. Learn from the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So whatever it is that we're suffering, there's an answer in the Gospels. Feeling offended, forgive 70 times 7. Forgiveness. Or uncertainty, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. Which was that passage in Matthew that we had already a talk about this in here before. About this denying yourself in the sense of understanding that there are aspects of our own selves that we must leave behind. Pride, selfishness. We must work on those so they more and more they become part of our past and not our present or future. That's the denying yourselves in a way. So you have these selfish tendencies, you have these egotistical tendencies. Careful with that. You got to learn to put a stop to that so you can truly achieve the progress in the result you want. So you see, there's a bunch of prescriptions in the gospel, and each of them spoken by our dear Jesus. And then Emmanuel is going to say, illness is almost always an adjustment, preventing us from falling into greater faults. Let us therefore organize the help of prayer. Remember we talked about work in prayer? Of prayer for all who suffer in their torn bodies. But if the healing delays, which it often does, for a reason, let us never be distressed. I struggle the most with this part, to be honest. If the healing delays, let us not be distressed. Let us not be impatient. Whether the bed is made of linen, silk, straw, or stone, the pain is always the same. The pain is always the same. It's the same for the most beautiful person in the world to the ugliest person, to the richest person in the world to the poorest person in the world. The pain is the same in the sense of we all have this instrument, the body, we all feel pain. You can have billions of dollars and you're going to feel disappointment, you're going to feel sadness. So the pain is always the same regardless of he says here, the type of bed, which is a nice way of saying, regardless of other material aspects, the pain is the same. And prayer everywhere is a blessing, comfort, support, light, and life. Let us remember, however, that injuries and wounds, frustrations and flaws in our outer form are remedies for the soul that we ourselves ask for from, and I love that he said this, the pharmacy of God. The pharmacy of God. Everything that's there at our disposal, because pain levels us. Pain can help us work the virtue of patience, the virtue of humility, because it levels us. But the prayer is this thing he's saying here that is very achievable and something that we must do so we can elevate our thoughts. We can get the remedies that we need from the pharmacy of God, which is always at our disposal. In terms of cure, Emmanuel says that may humankind be freed from illnesses, but it must also understand the value of health. It is indeed as difficult for us to understand the hidden lesson of diseases in the body as it is to assimilate the call to sanctifying work that beckons us through our physical healthiness. For us to understand, therefore, the value of health. So whenever we're healthy, of the body, or of the mind, by the way, let us cherish that. Let us try to maintain that state. Let us try to see what were the things that brought us to the fall in the first place, in our health, physical or mental. And let us learn from that. And in this book, this is a book, we don't have that in English, and this is a great book of messages, psychographed by Valdo Vieira. This is a book of messages from spiritists, people who are spiritists, but they discarnated, but they sent messages nonetheless, which is a very interesting concept. And there's two different messages, number 29, number 30, and I combined them both here in one. They say, let us apply the gospel to others and to ourselves, the divine pharmacy, valuable and free, whose remedies never pose the risk of contraindications, aimed at a wide range of disorders, presenting a real and honest formula, easy to use and affordable for all. So the gospel, everything that's there in the gospel, there's no contraindications by the medicine that was preached by Jesus. It treats a wide range of disorders, has an honest formula, and it costs nothing. And they even go on to list the different things, like they say that, sedatives relieve, but they do not realign. For this reason, prayer will always be an effective calming agent. Entertainment helps, but does not cure. However, spiritual study groups are valuable group psychotherapy. The glass of fluidic water, free and simple, is more practical to use than an intravenous injection. The home gospel, the gospel at home, often replaces to great advantage the most laborious psychoanalysis session. Forgiveness and forgetting all wrongs unquestionably surpasses the relaxation by barbiturates. All these things that are at our disposal, that are much better than a lot of the things that we have in the world, that we first go towards that before trying to do the gospel first. And to close here, just to put a thought by Joanna de Angelis, where she says, the thought channeled towards peace becomes a wave that synchronizes with the source of power, contributing to general understanding and fraternity, which is the first step of love among creatures. So she's talking about how synchronizing with the higher spirits, how exercising and putting this love that we all carry within ourselves, because we are made from God. We're made out of love, so we all have that divine spark in us of love. How that helps with the balance, helps with achieving integral health, the real one, the health of the spirit. Thank you, everyone, and I wish everybody a blessed week.